Good morning, grade 10. This is Mrs. Pascal. Today's lesson is chapter 10, section 10.2, radical expressions. The objective of this section is to multiply and divide radicals. First, we will start by correcting the homework to simplify the following radicals. Number 1, radical 16 over 25. We can write the radical in the numerator of the fraction and in the denominator as state the property. So we write it radical 16 over radical 25. If we know that 16 is the perfect square of 4, we can directly write the answer 4. If we don't, we need to use a prime decomposition for 16. The same radical 25. 25 is a perfect square of 5, so we can directly write 5. And we get 4 over 5 as simplest fraction. And number 2, radical 162t5 over 2t. This fraction can be reduced, so we need always to start by simplifying the fraction as possible as we can. So 162 divided by 2 gives 81. T7 over t, or t to the power 7 over t, gives t to the power 6. Again, 81 is a perfect square of 9. T to the power 6 can be reduced into t to the power 3, since every even exponent should be divisible by 2. So the final answer is 90 cubed. The square root of 49a5 over 4a cubed, the integers cannot be simplified, so we can reduce the fraction into radical 49a squared over 4. Radical of the numerator gives 7a, since 49 is a perfect square of 7. Square root of 4 gives 2. Now we will, in number 4, we have radical 2 over radical 11. It's already reduced fraction, so we need to write the fraction without the radical in the denominator. In order to do that, we need to rationalize the denominator. It means we need to multiply the numerator and the denominator by radical 11. So we get radical 22 over radical 11 square, or even you can write it 121. So if you write it 121, it's the perfect square of 11. So it gives you 11. Or if you write it as 11 to the power 2, radical of 11 square gives 11. And the final reduced form is radical 22 over 11. And number 5, radical 6 over radical 15. First, we need to start by simplifying the fraction, so it gives, dividing each radical by 3, we get radical 2 over radical 5. Radical 2 over radical 5 should be rationalized in order to remove the radical from the denominator, so we need to multiply the numerator and the denominator by radical 5, and then we get radical 10 over radical 25, or even 5 squared, which gives radical 10 over 5. Let's move now to more complicated cases in rationalizing the denominators. Number 1, radical 5 over radical 8x. First, as you notice, this fraction cannot be reduced, so we need to remove directly the radical from the denominator by multiplying the numerator and the denominator by the same radical. We get radical 40x over radical 64x squared. 64 is the perfect square of 8, so we can reduce the fraction into 8x. 40x, in order to reduce or simplify this radical, we need to write it into product of prime factor. So it's the product of 2 cubed times 5x. Since it's to reduce the square root, we need to have an even power, so we need to write the cubic root in the form of 2 squared times 2 to the power 1 times 5x. So 2 squared is reduced into 2. We get 2 radical 10x over 8x. Simplifying the fraction by 2, we get radical 10x over 4x. And number 2, radical 7 over radical 12a. In order to write the fraction, since it's irreducible, so we need to write the fraction without the radical in the denominator. So directly multiply the numerator and the denominator by radical of 12a. Reducing this writing, we get radical 84a over radical 144a squared. 144 is the perfect square of 12, so the reduced form is 12a. In the numerator, we need to do the prime factorization of 2 squared times 3 times 7a. It's reduced into 2 radical 21a over 12a. Again, this fraction can be simplified by 2, and the final answer is radical 21a over 6a. Okay, 3 radical 24 over radical 48 t to the power 4. First, start by simplifying the fraction by dividing it by radical 24. So we get 2 radical 2t to the power 4. T to the power 4 is also, square root of t to the power 4 can be reduced into t square. So it's 2 t square radical 2. Rationalizing the denominator, we can only multiply the fraction, the numerator and the denominator, by the radical 2. So we get 2 radical 2 over t square radical 4. It gives 2 radical 2 over 2 t square. Simplifying this fraction, we get radical 2 over t square. In number 4, starting by simplifying the fraction, we get 1 over radical of 6m squared. Radical of m squared can be reduced into m, so we have 1 over m radical 6. Again, rationalizing the denominator, we need to multiply the fraction by radical 6 over radical 6. So we get radical 6 over radical 36m, which gives radical 6 over 6m. In number 5, radical 24 over radical 3b. Simplifying the fraction first, we get radical 8 over radical b. Rationalizing the fraction, we get radical 8 over radical b times radical b over radical b. So it's radical 8b over radical b squared. Trying to reduce the writing of radical 8, we get radical of 2 squared times 2b over b. So it's 2 radical 2b over b. In number 6, radical 72 over radical 40. Dividing the fraction by radical 8, we get radical 9 over radical 5. Radical 9 is 3 over radical 5. So in order to rationalize this fraction, we need to multiply it by radical 5 in the denominator and in the numerator. So we get 3 radical 5 over radical 25, which gives 3 radical 5 over 5.